5 years after I shattered our marriage. I saw Ethan at the wedding and knew this was my last chance to make amends. 5 years later, I found myself face to face with my husband after he had caught me being unfaithful with my boss. It had been 5 long and painful years since my entire world collapsed, since Ethan, my husband and the man I once believed was my soulmate, discovered me in the arms of another man, Michael, my employer. The betrayal was so massive, it shattered not only Ethan, but also the life we had carefully built over more than 10 years. I replayed that night again and again in my mind. Ethan's stunned silence, his trembling hands gripping the takeout bag he had brought for me, and the way his eyes seemed to lose their light when he saw Michael and me in such a shameful position. He didn't yell. He didn't scream. He simply stood there, staring at me like I was a complete stranger, then turned and walked away. The divorce was unavoidable. Ethan refused to speak to me during the entire process, and I didn't blame him. I signed the papers in tears, knowing I had no right to fight for anything. Not our house, not our memories, and definitely not him. When it was finally over, I left town, unable to carry the burden of my mistakes or the judgment of our shared friends. Over the next few years, I focused on putting my life back together. Therapy became my safe space, a place where I explored the flaws of my marriage and faced the darker parts of myself that led to my betrayal. It wasn't just about the act of cheating. It was about loneliness, fear of not being good enough, and a deep craving for attention that I wrongly sought from Michael. I had destroyed the most valuable part of my life, and no amount of reflection could undo the damage. The guilt stayed with me every single day. But the most painful part wasn't betrayal itself. It was realizing how deeply Ethan had truly loved me in a way I never fully appreciated. He was patient, gentle, and supportive, always there when I needed him. He had been my rock, the one I could always count on. And yet, I betrayed him. I turned my back on everything we had created, everything we had fought so hard for together. Michael was nothing more than a temporary escape, a brief moment of attention in an otherwise empty space. But that moment came at the cost of losing the love of my life. When I received the wedding invitation, I almost didn't open it. It was from Sarah, one of Ethan's close friends, who had always treated me kindly. Seeing her name brought back a rush of memories, dinners, vacations, laughter. It felt like a different lifetime. I hesitated as I opened the envelope. When I saw the location, my stomach dropped. The wedding was going to be held at the same church where Ethan and I had exchanged our vows. A part of me wanted to tear the invitation in half and throw it away. But another part, the one longing for closure, felt an irresistible pull to attend. I had never had the chance to properly apologize to Ethan or say goodbye. And now here was that chance. The thought of going to the wedding was both terrifying and strangely comforting. I was still haunted by our memories, and I knew this might either bring healing or open old wounds again. Against my better judgment, I decided to attend. On the day of the wedding, I felt like a ghost walking through the halls of my past. The church looked nearly the same as it had on our wedding day. The same stained glass windows, the same warm candlelight, the same faint scent of old wood and roses. Every corner of that sacred place echoed fragments of memories with Ethan. I scanned the crowd nervously, torn between hoping to see him and dreading that I might. And then I saw him. Ethan. He sat near the front, effortlessly handsome in a dark suit. His hair had a bit more gray, but he held himself with the same quiet strength. He was speaking with a red-haired woman who laughed at something he said, her hand gently touching his arm. My stomach twisted with jealousy and regret. The woman with him was beautiful, graceful, elegant. Everything I felt I was not. A wave of bitterness and self-loathing washed over me. Was she the one who now held his heart? Did she make him happy in a way I never could? I tried to slip quietly into a pew, unnoticed, but my movement caught Ethan's eye. Our gazes locked, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. His expression was unreadable, not angry, not kind, just calm recognition. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say sorry. But no words came. I didn't deserve his forgiveness, not after what I had done. So I bowed my head and focused on the ceremony, silently wrestling with my emotions. When the vows were exchanged and the reception began, I stayed near the exit, unsure if I should leave before my emotions overwhelmed me. But fate had other plans. Clara, Ethan's voice called gently from behind me. I froze. My heart pounded as I turned to face him. There he was, standing only a few feet away, looking so much like the man I had once deeply loved. The ache in my chest was unbearable. "Ethan," I said, my voice trembling, revealing the storm of emotions inside me. Ethan appeared even more captivating than I had remembered. There was a newfound maturity about him, an inner peace I silently longed for. He was no longer the man I had once abandoned. There was a firmness in him now, a quiet fortitude that showed he'd endured the storm and moved forward, while I remained shackled by remorse. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said, his voice courteous yet detached, like we were mere acquaintances, not two people who had once shared years of deep affection and trust. "Neither did I confessed softly. Honestly, I wasn't sure coming was the right choice." "I see," Ethan replied with a brief nod, his gaze unwavering yet still impossible to decipher. "You're doing well?" I asked, my voice catching as I tried to maintain my composure. "I'm getting better, I suppose. Therapy helped," I said with effort, each word trembling on my lips. I've been trying to understand everything, to make sense of it. The words felt empty, like an apology I didn't quite know how to articulate. "I'm glad to hear that," Ethan responded, his tone calm but emotionally distant. There was no trace of the rage or heartbreak I had seen in him the night he discovered me with Michael. I couldn't tell whether that meant he had truly forgiven me, or if he simply no longer cared. "I'm so sorry, Ethan," I murmured, crushed beneath the weight of 5 years' worth of guilt. "I was selfish. I ruined everything we had. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I needed you to know how deeply sorry I am. I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me." Ethan regarded me for a moment, his expression softening ever so slightly. "I don't know if I'll ever forgive you, Clara," he said with raw honesty, "but I've made peace with it. I had to. It took time, a lot of it. I won't pretend it didn't rip me apart, but it's behind me now. I've moved forward." His eyes drifted toward the woman with vibrant red hair, now laughing and talking with someone near the dance floor. "I found peace," he added. A sharp sting of envy pierced through me, but I quickly suppressed it. I no longer had the right to feel that way. "I never stopped loving you," I admitted in a whisper. I wasn't the woman you deserved." Ethan's eyes softened briefly, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a glimmer of the man I had once known so intimately. But that moment vanished, replaced by something else, a quiet finality that I could only identify as closure. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Clara," he said, his voice tender yet resolute. "You deserve that, but it's not going to be with me." I gave a small nod, the truth of his words sinking deep into my soul. He was right. I had lost him, and no amount of sorrow or reflection could ever change that. As I stood there, facing the man I had once loved more than anything, I came to a powerful realization. I couldn't undo the past. I couldn't erase the decisions that shattered us, nor could I revive the love we once nurtured. But I could learn. I could grow. I could become a woman who no longer sought validation through others, who stood on her own with dignity, unburdened by shame. With that understanding, I turned and walked away, leaving the past where it belonged. It was time to begin again. "It's been a while," Ethan said gently, shattering the silence. "It has," I replied, my voice barely audible. The years had gone by, yet in that instant, it felt as if no time had passed at all. We stood together in the dim glow, two people who had once shared everything, now looking at each other as strangers linked only by memory. The air between us was thick with what remained unspoken, every second laced with fragments of what once was. There was a hesitant pause, heavy with our history, so suffocating it nearly choked the words from my throat. I didn't know how to begin. Time had changed us, but the past still clung to us like an old, persistent ghost. "Do you want to talk?" Ethan finally asked, his voice unexpectedly soft. I hadn't anticipated the question, and for a moment, I didn't know how to reply. "Yeah," I murmured, my voice quivering as I struggled to suppress the tears threatening to fall. I had yearned for this moment in some strange, tangled way, but now that it had arrived, I felt bare, defenseless in a way I hadn't foreseen. We stepped outside, away from the chatter and laughter of the reception. The evening breeze was brisk, and I folded my arms across my chest, seeking a sense of comfort. For a few moments, we stood silently, the muffled sounds of the celebration fading into the distance. It felt like we were teetering on the edge of something deep and aching, something neither of us was quite ready to confront. "I heard you left the city," Ethan said, his voice breaking the silence like a ripple through undisturbed water. "I did," I answered, inhaling deeply as the crisp night air stung my skin. I couldn't stay. Everything around me was a reminder of what I'd done, like living inside a house filled with memories, each one more haunting than the last. Ethan's gaze softened, though his expression remained unreadable. "And Michael?" he asked, his tone level, as though bracing for impact. It ended not long after everything happened. I confess, the words heavy and laced with shame. It was never genuine. It was a terrible, selfish mistake. I thought it would fill the emptiness I felt inside, but it only deepened it. His jaw tightened, and a flicker of something, anger, sorrow, or perhaps both, flashed in his eyes. For a moment, he said nothing, and the weight of my truth hovered between us. I feared he might walk away, that it would be too much to hear. But instead, he spoke again, his voice low, as if dragging the words from a painful place. "I spent years trying to figure out what I did wrong," he began. "I kept wondering if I wasn't good enough, if there was something I missed, something I could have done differently. I convinced myself maybe I was the one who failed." Tears welled in my eyes as I listened, fighting to keep them from falling. "It wasn't you, Ethan," I said, my voice thick with sorrow. "It was me. I was scared, insecure. I let those fears destroy everything we had. You were more than enough. I just couldn't see it back then." He looked at me for a long time, his gaze heavy with emotion, a mixture of sorrow and something else I couldn't quite name. Maybe acceptance. He was harder to read now, but it was clear he had moved forward. "I've moved on, Clara," he said at last, cutting through the silence. His tone was composed, but there was finality in his words. "It wasn't easy, but I had to. You can't live in the past forever." I nodded slowly, a dull ache spreading through my chest. I always knew he'd move on, but hearing it aloud struck a deeper wound. Still, I managed a faint smile. "I'm glad," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You deserve happiness, Ethan. You always did." He paused for a beat, his tone softening. "And you? Have you found peace?" His question hit harder than I expected. I wanted to lie, to say yes, that I was fine, that I'd figured everything out. But the truth was far more complicated. "I'm trying," I admitted, my voice cracking. "I've spent the last 5 years trying to understand myself, trying to forgive myself. It's still a work in progress. I don't know if I'll ever fully find peace, but I'm learning to believe that maybe that's okay." We stood there in silence, time slipping around us, the faint music from the reception seeping through the windows, distant and irrelevant. In that moment, all that mattered was a fragile bond still lingering between us, a thread that stretched but didn't quite break. "I'm glad we talked," Ethan said finally, his voice low and sincere. "I think I needed this more than I realized." "Me too," I whispered. It felt as though a burden had been lifted, though I knew the journey was far from over. "I'm so sorry for everything, Ethan," I said again, my voice trembling. "I hope you know that. I hope you know how deeply I regret the way things ended." "I do," he replied, a faint, knowing smile crossing his lips. There was no bitterness, no resentment, only quiet understanding. The past had shaped us, but it didn't have to control us anymore. "I hope you find happiness, Clara," he said gently. His voice was soft, yet firm. "You deserve it. We both do." A lump rose in my throat. For a second, I wasn't sure I could speak, but somehow I found the words. "Thank you," I whispered. "I hope you find everything you've been looking for, too." He gave me one last look, a blend of warmth and perhaps resolution, before turning and walking back toward the reception hall. I watched him go, an unexpected sense of closure settling over me. It felt like a door had closed, but not in the way I had dreaded for years. For so long, I had carried the burden of guilt and remorse, convinced I had shattered something beyond repair. But standing there, beneath the starlit sky, I understood something I hadn't before. Forgiveness, both his and my own, was the first step toward healing. I had lost Ethan through my own choices. But healing wasn't about rewriting the past. It was about moving forward in spite of it. As I watched him disappear into the warm glow of the celebration, I felt something I hadn't in years. Hope. Maybe I could begin again.